Hello and welcome to Ant and Rabbit. I am Ant. He is Rabbit. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm a little tired. A little tired. We got
Yeah.
a little early morning here on the West Coast. I was up late last night. Of course, I wanted to get sleep for the show and be prepared and be my best version of myself for you and
But
our audience. But this always happens where I'm like looking for something to watch to fall asleep. First, are you a TV on go to sleep guy? Are you music?
every
Do you have
night,
it's are you're not mood lights or the sounds of the rain or
TV on.
that sounded like the Airheads radio station that they're moving to.
Yeah.
Sound of the rain.
The
Okay, so you're
quiet storm.
so you're in okay, so you will fall asleep to TV on.
Yeah.
I'm a TV on guy too. And if I wake up and it's asleep or it's like blue screen or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
got to turn something back on. I got to have the
Absolutely.
background noise. I don't need intrusive thoughts. I need something going on that for whatever reason. And it's very important what it is too. And that's
hmm
almost like I need the familiarity, but not something that's going to draw me in too much to where I am only paying attention
No,
to
you got
what's
to
on
have
TV.
comfort food, something you've seen a bunch of times. You can see it in your head as you're falling asleep, and that's good.
Yes. And so as someone with glasses as well, you're
hmm
same thing. I want to visualize and as I hear what's going on and not necessarily have to be in the moment and watching what's going on.
Right.
I should be able to see it in my head and it should not be so gripping that I am unable to fall asleep.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm pretty good about what I choose. Like it could be old
hmm
wrestling documentaries specifically.
Sure.
And we'll get to some wrestling stuff later. I'm an Oak Island fan. It could be Oak Island.
Yep.
Um, Movies or TV shows that are kind of lighthearted, old school TV. Happy Days is great for me.
Yeah.
Last night, and this my issue is sometimes late at night I will choose a documentary that I will just really get entranced by
Oh, that's a
and I'm
mistake.
unable sometimes it's really negative unsolved mysteries or whatever like stuff that you should not be watching right before bed even just for my mindset of negativity I feel like can be so like taken by that
Yeah.
um so I did avoid the murder docs last night but
Okay.
on Tubi, which is right now
Love it.
what's on Tubi. I know there's commercials, but it's as good. Like what they have right now is as good as any streaming service.
You're absolutely right.
Um, and the documentary called First Eight or
Ooh,
The
tell me about
First
this
Eight.
one.
This is about Quentin Tarantino's filmmaking and basically his kind of
Okay, yeah.
his history through the first eight. Have you seen this documentary?
I haven't seen it, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I've seen of it.
Yeah. I wasn't really familiar with it, but it was hard for me to not be totally like I was a part of it. You know what
Your
I mean?
brain is on. That's not what you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah, and I put on at like 11:30 and of course I watched the whole damn thing and it's an hour and a half, hour 40. And I was just like, well, these movies are familiar to me. I've seen them all. I love them all. But the interviews and everything and the history that goes in each movie and kind of sort of a A&E biography style or behind the music of
hmm
Quentin Tarantino, but really just the movies specifically and little stories about them. And then if someone tells a story, they'll do kind of this cool thing that we've seen. I don't know the last decade plus, where it'll be like a well drawn cartoon to
Oh, sure.
reenact the story, which I always love. So you have those little pieces and people who are a big part of making his movies different producers or Michael Madsen and Jennifer Jason Lee and um Mr. Orange is on there, Tim Roth. I mean, you have a number of really important people throughout the way. Samuel L. Jackson, Jamie
Of
Foxx. I mean, this
course.
is and it's really cool because it's called The First Date about his first 8 movies. Mainly about the ones he directed, but there's a hint of Dust Till Dawn and True Romance in there as well.
Okay.
But for each of the 8, there's a little logo for each movie.
Oh,
And if it is there's like one of is like Uma Thurman's stunt double, and one of the stunt doubles who is one of the people who are interviewed, And what it will do is it under their name, it'll be like, whatever their name, and then the logo underneath their name will be highlighted to say which movies they were in. So
Oh,
like for
cool.
for Tim Roth, it was Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, and then Hateful Eight.
Hmm.
And for Samuel L. Jackson, it was like pretty much everything
Reservoir.
except for Reservoir Dogs.
Hmm.
Is he in Inglorious Bastards? Maybe his voice is at
Yeah,
one
he
point or
is.
something. Why can't I
Isn't
think
he?
of Why can't I think of what he does in Inglorious Bastards?
Oh man, maybe not. Maybe not. Look it up.
Got to do it. I want to say he lends his voice. Samuel L. Jackson. Yeah, he's the voice actor, so he's the narrator at times, I
Oh, there you
guess.
go.
Okay, because I was like, I know he's somewhat involved at some point, but yeah, pretty much nothing. Not in after Reservoir Dogs. He's been in pretty much everything he's done.
Yeah.
And this was made leading up to or during the filming of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Okay.
Um, but just a really fun documentary. There's just such good stories, and then you also get some of the Weinstein controversy and how they were buddies, and kind of the how that all broke down, and what an awful human, as we all know now, and many people knew then. Did Just because you were into movies on kind of another level for so long, was there? Did you know before, like in other earlier Miramax days, that this guy is a huge,
I mean, there are always stories about. I mean, really, what a monster! Like a guy who threw around his power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not to the extent of the things that came out in more recent years. It was more about his abuse of power and how he would throw chairs and throw fits and swing his power to ruin or make people's careers. And but I never heard like the real lecherous stuff that came out later on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was more along the lines of studio executive who got it all right away and threw threw that power around in people's faces at every opportunity, and
Yeah.
I'll ruin you and how you'll never work again in this town, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of positivity in the documentary as well, like how he writes female characters or how he writes black characters as a white guy. Like there's like people weren't really making women characters as important as he did, and how strong they were. Like look at Jackie Brown and look
Yeah.
at Kill Bill. Like there's just a lot of good stuff there. Um,
That's cool.
you
And this was on
yeah,
Tubi, you said.
this was on Tubi. Yeah, it's on there right now. I would definitely check that one out. Christopher Waltz is on there. Like he's just such a fun interview, and
Yeah.
um, you learn a lot about how he gets inside the actors too. Tarantino, in their brain, of just like he doesn't tell them how to say something, but he will make sure they understand the purpose of, like, he would talk to the stunt double of Uma Thurman and say things like, "Okay, you're running up the stairs here. Why?" And she's like, "Because that's my job," or and he's like,
Hmm.
"No, this is because you are seeking revenge against this person who took your life from you," and all these like. And she's like, after that, I was running with a purpose, like, and just stuff like that, and being on set and involved and like right next to the camera, and how he shoots his films, and Hateful Eight being on 70 or whatever. Is that something you pay attention to as a movie watcher, like
Yeah.
when it's like film versus digital?
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that we have coming to town today is Michael Mann's Heat is coming to town on a 35 millimeter print, and I'm very excited because like anytime we can get something like that, I remember going to the road show that Tarantino had for Hateful Eight when he was
Hmm.
showing on 70 millimeter. Like, yeah, this is cool. It's not something that's readily available these days. So yeah, I do enjoy that quite a bit. And I've been speaking of Tarantino, I have been kind of delving into his mind recently because I've got his latest book for Christmas. And it's kind of his autobiography told through movies. And it's really interesting of him going back to him as a child and discovering movies and how he was introduced to all the movies his parents didn't discern between adult movies and movies for kids, and so he would just go to everything that they saw, and it's been really interesting, kind of getting into the mind of him through that way. It's a good book.
I love that. I will have to check that out.
Yeah.
The Hateful Eight. So where did you, from Madison, Wisconsin
Mhm.
area, where did you go to see the Hateful Eight on film?
Chicago.
Okay, that's that makes the most sense for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a place in Chicago that routinely shows 35 and 70 millimeter, the
Yeah.
Music Box Theater down there. That kind of is one of the big hubs for that. But we also get them a lot here on campus at UW Madison. The Cinematheque is one of the biggest restoration, film restoration places in the country, one of the premier places for restoring films. And one of the heads of Sony Restoration is from Sun Prairie here, and so there's a lot of connections here for those types of films getting restored here, getting shown here for free. It's a pretty good deal. So
Oh, that's awesome. I
yeah,
I had no idea.
yeah, yeah. So like we have our film festival starting up next week as you and I are talking right now, and we're getting a few different films from Sony Restoration being brought, films that haven't been showed in 60, 70, 80 years, have not been shown on a big screen, lost to time, and then cuts were found and
Oh,
meticulously restored. And now we are showing some of them for the first time ever because Sony Restoration is giving them to us. Or one of the first things I saw down on our campus at our Cinematheque was an Akira Kurosawa film that hadn't been shown at the point that I saw it. It had been 80 years since it was shown on a screen.
oh my
And
God.
the UW Madison got a hold of various cuts of it, pieces of the film, basically,
Yeah.
fully restored it, showed it for the first time since like 1940.
Oh my
And
God.
I'm sitting there going like, wow, last time, I mean, this has literally been never been shown on a big screen like this before since pre World War II.
That's
You
that's
know,
something special.
yeah, it's pretty
Um,
cool. You really think about it, you know.
in 2002, 2003, they came out with what is known as the Led Zeppelin DVD, and this
Okay,
two-disc set of 5 or 6 concerts, and there was a lot that went into the restoration of the film and everything that they had. Like, they found old cuts that nobody had seen and concert footage that they put together, and they put together these like really 5 or 6 full concerts between the two discs. And there's some early stuff, then there's one of the early but still very big, obviously, Madison Square Garden concerts, and just piecing together what they could and using other still shots and whatever to kind of fill in the gaps or whatever. But my understanding was that they had to do a lot of the restoration that you're talking about, and including baking some of the film in an oven, I guess.
huh?
To I don't know. Are you familiar with this? Have you heard of this?
No,
Like, I don't know if that's what the shape that it was in when they got it, or if that's something I have no idea why that was part of it, but that was something they said they had to do to get the I don't know if it was like deteriorating, and why that would help it or whatever the case was.
maybe that
But
stops the deterioration.
I wonder exactly what it was, or bakes
Huh?
off some of the issues or whatever. But when you talked
Huh?
about the film restoration, that's what came to my mind, was that Led Zeppelin DVD, which is one of I don't know if you ever got big into like the music DVDs and things like that, but
Not
for a
really.
while
No.
okay, that was for me. For a while, that was always fun to go to whatever exclusive company or
Sure.
dare I say Best Buy, and look through the music DVDs and find stuff like that. And that was one that I had learned about from Rolling Stone and all that went into it,
Okay.
the magazine. And when that came out, I got that right away. And I thought I had lost it, but I just found it again a few months ago.
Oh, nice.
When I was back in Wisconsin, I was like, I have a bunch of DVDs, and my stepsister was like, "You didn't lose them? Aren't they under the bed?" And I had no idea I had DVDs
Oh,
under the
that's
bed.
cool.
And so I found it again, and that Led Zeppelin DVD from, I want to say, 2003 is just incredible. But yeah, the film restoration, that sounds awesome. I had no idea that Madison was such a big spot for that. And then you got to
Yeah.
see, a Akira Tozawa film from
from forever ago. Yeah, I mean, and
Yeah.
so they do series all year long.
Kurosawa, sorry.
Kurosawa, yeah. They do
Yeah.
series all year long. During the school year, each semester they have a different series, and they'll have like 6 different series going on at a time, and they're all free showings. And some of them are new movies, some of them are like right now. The reason I'm going to see Heat is because they're doing a whole Michael Mann series. Like they showed Thief the other night. They're doing a whole series on his films, but some of them are, a lot of foreign films, but a lot of them are special restorations of films that have been seen in forever. And I mean, that's cool. That's a lot of fun. So.
Yeah. No, I think it's cool, so I can only imagine with your elevated love and knowledge of film and theater that's a pretty special deal.
Yeah, you get to see something really rad on a big screen. That doesn't always happen.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, with this, there was a lot of things they go to on this documentary is also the connections between the characters and the Red Apple cigarettes or
Oh, sure, yeah.
tobacco and things that you just kind of are a continuity thing, or that Tim Roth's character in Hateful Eight is the great great grandpa of Michael Mann or Fassbender's character in in Inglorious
It's
Bastards, or
crazy.
the Vega connection
Right.
between between Travolta's character in Pulp Fiction and Madsen's character in Reservoir Dogs. Just a lot of fun
I
stuff.
remember hearing about that years and years ago about the Vega brothers and how Tarantino teased that he was going to make a Vega brothers movie. And
Yes.
I see that pop up. I just saw it pop up again recently with his announcement that he's making his final movie, whatever.
Yeah, and
And
we've
I
heard that a
saw,
few times.
oh yeah, come on. He is very much like Kevin Smith, where he's always announcing the end or announcing projects that will never happen. I
Yeah.
mean, Kevin Smith announced 20 projects that'll never happen. Tarantino's, his Star Trek project and all these various things, the Vega Brothers project, like all these things, like that sounds cool. It'll never happen, and your passion for movies will never allow you to retire this soon.
Sure. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah,
And Madsen even brings up in the documentary, and this is from like 2018, and I don't spoiler alert. He's like, both of our characters are dead, so I don't know how
yeah,
we're gonna do it. They would have to be a prequel.
yeah,
You brought up Kevin Smith, who I wanted to touch on a little bit too, because he's another Miramax guy, another,
yeah,
the Weinstein days. It's just crazy to me
yeah.
that those guys, same time, and two of my three favorite directors, I'd throw Wes Anderson in there with
But
Tarantino and Kevin Smith.
Tarantino and Smith were like the Miramax Wonder Kids,
Yeah,
of that early '90s indie movie. Miramax being the branch of Disney, but really a big indie powerhouse. And yeah, Weinstein kind of latched on to both of those guys, and them both Kevin and Quentin have spent the second half of their careers trying to distance themselves from him. You know,
yeah, yeah. It's very interesting to me. And then you have Kevin Smith with Clerks, which took a couple years for it to come out, and then in '94,
hmm
and then Pulp Fiction also in '94. I mean,
right?
what a freaking year! And I mean, yes, there's a lot of differences in their styles, and I think that Tarantino is better with his visuals and
Oh yeah,
and things like that. I don't think is really a contest. And you just look at his career arc where Pulp Fiction is probably still the best thing he's ever done, but I wouldn't say he's gone down. Like, he's just gone.
no,
There's and
he's
he's
diversified his
there you
career.
go. Sure.
He finds, I mean, he's dabbled in almost every genre,
Mhm.
and he's excelled at it. And both of them, I think, their strength is writing dialogue, right? I think both of them conversational dialogue. That's the strength of their early films, especially. And
Mhm.
Tarantino took that strength and used it as a building block for making movies and creating interesting concepts in movies. And Kevin, I felt, never fully branched away from that. He stayed within a very small universe, stayed within the same characters, more or less, and the conversational pace. He would be the first to admit he's not a great filmmaker, quote unquote,
Mhm.
because I don't think he's really expanded his vision very much. And when he has, I felt like it's gone off the rails. when he's like, I'm gonna make Tusk.
I
I'm gonna
knew you
make
were
a
going to
movie
bring
about
up Tusk.
Nazi sausages, and like, okay. But that's also partly because for a large chunk of his career, he wasn't focused on finding great actors, whereas Tarantino discovered and rediscovered some formerly
Sure.
great and forgotten great actors. Whereas Kevin Smith is like, yeah, I got just regular people and friends and my daughter who's not a great actress, and and like kind of fall bass backwards into being friends with Affleck, but really most of your cast is mediocre actors delivering really interesting dialogue.
No, I'm glad you brought up dialogue because that is the clear, other than the Miramax connection, the clear, something I think they mirror each other in some ways is their just great dialogue where you hear
Yeah.
a conversation and you're just like, that is a conversation I have with my friends about not tipping, about going to a store, even though I work at this type of store, but going to a different store that's the same kind of
Yeah,
store, but
you
a better
take those
store.
first two movies and it's both guys who are like, I'm on a low budget.
Yes.
Um
One
I
location, basically.
Yeah, and I'm going to write some really interesting dialogue that's going to be memorable. And yeah, you take Reservoir and you take Clerks, and yeah, they are echoes of the time period and the indie filmmaking of that time. And I think they were the two best guys at writing that kind of dialogue.
And you brought up the diversification of Quentin Tarantino. And I don't even, I guess you could call the first, Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs gangster films, I guess.
Yeah.
Jackie Brown, Blaxploitation. Then you have Kill Bill, Samurai,
Yeah.
Kung Fu ish.
Yep.
You've got then
You got Hateful
what's the
Eight with
one
the
with
Western.
yeah, Hateful Eight with the Western,
Then you
Planet
have the
Terror,
Grindhouse
the
with,
Grindhouse.
yeah.
There you go. So, and also sort of his slasher in a
Yeah.
way. Inglorious Bastards, a war film that doesn't really show much war, and you have the Western with Django and or if you I
Hateful
guess
Eight.
yeah, Hateful Eight also a Western, or what would you Django? You would also
Yeah,
I guess
Django's kind of it's a little of everything because it has a very 70s feel as well, which
mm-hmm.
Quentin loves. I mean, he espouses for 300 pages in this book about how the 70s were the greatest decade of cinema.
Yeah.
So yeah, it kind of also kind of digs into that blaxploitation, that Jim Brown type of movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, really. So when he announced I'm going to do a Star Trek movie, I was like, well, okay. So sci-fi is the only thing you haven't done, really.
Yeah. Where does that? So I've been hearing for years, and you mentioned that of projects that will never happen. Is where
Yeah.
is that at? Is
I,
that
I don't think it's happening now. He announced it and was going on and kind of like got the internet freaking out about it a couple years ago. But at this point, I don't believe he is any longer attached to it. I think they're
okay?
going in a different direction, which is just fine with me because he was like, I'm going to make an R-rated Star Trek movie and people are going
Yeah.
to be swearing. And I think a lot of Star Trek fans lost it. Like, wait a minute, what are you doing? What are you doing to our franchise?
Yeah. Honest, I would love to see him do a sci-fi
I would too.
in general. I think that would be really cool. It doesn't necessarily have to be tied to Star Trek or any other already
He's
existing
never been tied to a
sci-fi
previous
link.
franchise, which is what made
Yeah,
it strange to me to begin with. Is like, you're one of the most original creative minds. Like, why would you want to attach yourself to a franchise that's been around for 60 years?
exactly. Give us a Galaxy Quest reboot.
Right. There you go. Yeah.
Um, the Kevin Smith thing is very interesting to me because, and especially after those first 4, even 5 movies, he was in my top 3 director, and now, like I said, Wes Anderson, Quentin Tarantino, and Kevin Smith, and man, basically the last 20 years, which is crazy to think that it's been that long. I don't really have another Kevin Smith thing to hang my hat on other than maybe some of his spoken word or Q&As that he
Sure, sure.
releases in sort of in the form of stand-up comedy, which I do enjoy, or the sort of reality TV show about his comic book shop, Secret
Yeah.
Stash in New Jersey. I find a lot of fun in that. It's kind of a mixture of, it's kind of like a comic book nerd version of Pawn Stars, I guess, in a way. And I'm not
Yeah.
necessarily into Pawn Stars, but I love the stories that they give behind comic book characters and movies and actors and even Star Trek stuff or nerdy stuff and toys from the 60s and 70s and
Yeah.
other conversations I think they have. I think that was a fun show, but you wouldn't put anything like that or Tusk or the the many Clerks remakes and reboots and whatever the hell
Yeah,
as
Clerks 3 was good.
okay.
But it felt like somebody just driving over the same tracks for the fifth time, you know.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what do you think he needs? Does he get to direct or produce or do something with cuz they've kind of tried that with him for doing a superhero movie to an extent, and that kind of flamed out with you can hear his story about the Superman reboot from early 2000s
Or
and
him directing Cop Out, where he's like, I'll make somebody else's movie.
god,
And
yes.
that flamed out horribly for many reasons.
Sure.
But he didn't work within that system.
Yeah.
Um, and he's been talking for years that he has his final movie. He's going to make a movie called Hit Somebody. And it was, he talked about it ad nauseum as he does most things, about how this was going to be a thing. It was going to be Bruce Willis and this aging hockey player. It's going to be like the wrestler for hockey.
Okay.
And that thing has changed 1,000 times. His falling out with Bruce Willis then he's like, I'm going to make it into a comic book, and then it's going to be a streaming series, and then now it's nothing. You hear this guy talk so passionately about this passion project of his, and I'm like, how can you just not do it? How can you just
Yeah.
let it
Um
fizzle like that? It's wild to me.
Yeah, he's gotten me excited about so many things that have never happened. And I did say the last 20 years, but there are two things that I guess stand out a little bit. Clerks 2, to a certain extent, I was just mad
Hmm.
that it was called Clerks 2. And
Hmm.
I just don't like things being tied to the greatness that is the first Clerks, which is my favorite movie ever.
Yeah.
And then Zach and Miri Make a Porno. I think
Yeah,
it's a fun rated R film,
it is.
but he's even said, I was trying to be Apatow. I got Apatow's guys.
Yeah.
It's Seth Rogen and Craig Robinson. Like it's kind of the frat pack
Hmm.
that like style of movie, and we I do find it to be a fun and enjoyable and funny film, and making the Star Wars porno and everything, and
Yeah.
but it is also like it wasn't him, and he's even come out and said that basically. And I don't even, God, Cop Out, yeah, I couldn't even tell you one thing or joke from film that I recall,
All I remember from that is the stories that he's told. I remember those more than anything, about how
which is
Bruce
him and
Willis
Willis hated each other, right?
yeah, how Bruce Willis refused to like run during an action scene, and all these things that like, that's what I remember more than anything, is that
Mm-hmm.
the stories told about the horrors on set. Yeah,
Still hoping for that comeback though. I would love to
I am
see
too.
if he could do something that really gets me engaged and fired up for to be
I
a
am
fan of
too.
his again.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what that will be, but he was a big part of maybe writing the Netflix He-Man cartoon that
Yes.
came back,
Yeah.
and that seemed to be popular for a few months, and I was interested because he was a part of it, but I wasn't engaged enough to like stick with it and watch the entire series, and maybe I will at some point, but
Hmm.
it's not very high on my list of things to do or watch. But
Yeah, I tried getting into it, and I couldn't stay engaged with it.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he needs to grow an evil Walt Disney mustache, and
Yeah.
that's how you get creative.
So who yeah, any billionaires do that recently?
I'm just saying, that's how you get creative again, is you dye your hair and grow an evil mustache. It works for
uh
Vince McMahon. It works for
there you
anyone.
go. Well, speaking of Vince McMahon, last week was WrestleMania. It is kind of become a two-night event. I think
Yeah.
it started with 2020 and the COVID year, or 2021, and they have now made it a two-night event. It's a Saturday night and a Sunday night, 4 or 5 hours each. You've seen it all from the two nights.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I remember talking to you a little bit about first night. You said it was a bit uneven in terms of matches and things like that, but
Really enjoyable.
okay.
Yeah. I think it was one of the stronger nights of it. I mean, yeah, uneven. Like
Yes.
there's some things that I thought were, ugh, but there was some really great stuff on there too.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun, and part of it is atmosphere is a big deal too. Like I had a
Hmm.
friend over who was also a longtime wrestling fan. We did up some steak nachos and had some drinks, and it was like we made it feel like a big fight night. And then
Yeah.
my roommate and his girlfriend were, and who's also my roommate, were at the house hanging out, kind of partying with us, and he is a big Logan Paul fan.
Oh boy.
So he like that is fun for him to kind of watch
Yeah.
that stuff, which I think is such a cool thing about WrestleMania is that you don't have to be a wrestling fan to enjoy the night, the occasion, the event,
Hmm.
and you can kind of get in and a lot of times there has been a lot of celebrities involved, whether it be Snoop Dogg hosting this year, Kevin Hart doing it's the intros and outros. Other years we've seen Floyd Mayweather in a match.
Yeah.
Shaq has been involved. I mean, Aretha Franklin at the first WrestleMania, Liberace, Mr. T involved in some of those first few main event matches.
Mike
I mean,
Tyson.
Mike Tyson, one of the biggest ones. Yeah, 98, 99.
Yeah.
He's a big part of the DX Stone Cold HBK situation. Lawrence Taylor,
Right.
former like
I
he
forget
headlined at
about that one.
WrestleMania. He headlined at WrestleMania with Bam Bam Bigelow. He
I
was in the
forget
final
about that.
match. Yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah. um, but okay, so just like your history with WrestleMania. Do you remember the first one that you watched? Was it
Yeah.
you got the tape later? Did you watch it live? How did that all like your
Yeah.
interest
So,
in?
I grew up a big wrestling fan in the early mid 80s, like right when Hulkamania was hitting was when I was getting into wrestling. I watched a lot of AWA when I was a kid because I grew up there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I remember like when Hulk won the title over Sheik, like I was just getting into it big time. And so I remember having the first two having to rent the Coliseum home video, 6
Okay.
months after it came out, 6
Yeah.
months after WrestleMania, like in the before school started, like the Coliseum home video would come out, rent that two tape disc, two tape cassette. The first one that I was able to actually watch live was WrestleMania 4, which was the tournament for the vacant championship that
Okay.
Macho eventually won the tournament.
Yes.
My
Yes.
uncle rented the pay-per-view, and my uncle was this big biker, and he had all of his biker buddies over, and then there was me at
I
like
love it.
8 years old, still a total mark kayfabe, and these I'm hanging out with all these bikers, and they're into it, and they're laughing at me, but they're also having a great time, and they're rooting for the bad guys, which is infuriating me,
Yeah.
it was a very memorable time. Yeah, yeah.
I love that. Do you have a macho? You have another Macho Man story. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
around that same time is when I ran into him at the Minneapolis airport. It was right in that same wheelhouse of time, dropping my aunt off at the airport at like 4 in the morning, and my dad and I walking through the concourse after dropping her and seeing Macho and lovely Elizabeth come walking down, and he is in like the robes as though he's going to the ring. You could see the sequins sparkling off the wall before he came around the corner. It was like a disco ball coming around the
Yeah.
corner, and then all of a sudden there he is, and me like totally marking out for it. It was great.
See, and that's what I love about wrestling, especially up to a certain point, where the kayfabe, like you talked about, like the story of wrestling and wrestlers being wrestlers, even when you do run into them at the airport or the gas station or whatever it might be. A lot of times, most of the times, especially back in the day, you got them in character. Like,
Absolutely, 100%. It was, oh, what's up, little man?
yeah. I think that's such a cool thing. And that's what, when you run into Arnold Schwarzenegger, like, he's not playing the Terminator.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's one thing I always thought was so cool about wrestling is where the lines are drawn, and in some cases they aren't drawn. Like you are that character, you are that person.
Yeah.
Anywhere, anytime you're in public, then you gotta. If you're a bad guy, you gotta not say thank you and be impolite at times and
Right.
kind of be a jerk. And if you're a good guy, then yeah, you high five the kids, you sign some autographs. I think that's such a cool thing with the I don't know, the non-existent fourth wall, I guess, of wrestling, where it's
Although I do
just
like that there are guys that still do that now, like MJF over in AEW. I love seeing YouTube clips of
yes,
him just giving it to fans, just being the character with these fans, and the fans like being so excited. I'm gonna get insulted by this guy. He is gonna
yeah.
call me out. I'm watching one last night. It was a dude in a wheelchair, and MJF is going at him hardcore about being in a wheelchair, and this guy isn't offended. He's not crying. He's giving it right back to him. And it's like, oh, this is like old days of wrestling. Like the
Oh
bad
my
guy is
god.
the bad guy, even when you just paid him for an autograph. He's
Ugh.
gonna insult you.
I love that too, and that's why a lot of old school wrestlers put MJF at the top of their list of bad guys in current wrestling, is
Yeah.
because that he is always that jerk and that
Yeah.
guy, and
Right.
I think that's so awesome. My first Mania, so I got into wrestling like '99. This is near the tail end of the Attitude Era.
Mhm.
It wasn't until 2002 that I had finally convinced my mom that I'm getting this pay-per-view. I'm ordering it on the cable
I'm a
box. Like,
big boy and I'm
this
getting
is how I'm
it.
a big boy now. I think I was in 8th grade, and had my buddy over who was a longtime wrestling fan, and this was The Rock versus Hogan. This is
Oh,
WrestleMania
18.
18. Yep.
Yeah.
The NWO coming back, Vince McMahon trying to kill his own product,
Mhm.
as the storyline was. And it was in Toronto. It was great because Hulk Hogan comes in the bad guy, The Rock is the good guy, and but Toronto, another city that had previously hosted WrestleMania, was a
Mhm.
huge Hogan town. Like there are a ton of Hogan fans. So during the match, even though storyline says The Rock is the good guy coming into the match, Hogan is the bad guy. The crowd is that starts off somewhat even. As the
Yep.
match goes on,
They
everyone
flip.
starts they flip for Hogan, and they're all on his side. And Rock, even just his facial expressions, becomes the bad guy. This was not planned. This was them reacting off the crowd, where we started to see Rock use his heel gimmicks from a few years earlier, before he became a babyface, before he became champion, before he left for Hollywood, basically.
Yeah.
And he's facing Hollywood Hogan. So there's just so many fun parallels, like in this story, and the switching between being a good guy, being a bad guy, and they even have it so at the end of the match, Hogan basically becomes a good guy because the crowd is with him, and The Rock is almost like they're both good guys. And
Mhm.
so the whole story and just the way it shifted around during the match and afterwards, and then went into Hogan going back to being from Hollywood Hogan to being the red, white, and blue, say your prayers and eat your vitamins, drink your milk Hulk
Yeah.
Hogan. And it wasn't the final match, not technically the main event. It wasn't for a title, but it didn't need to be.
No, it
But
was the big one. It's the one you remember from 18.
oh, without a doubt. Without
Yeah.
a doubt. And the crowd interaction, and they stand in the ring for maybe a couple minutes before they even touch
Yeah.
to start wrestling.
Yeah, just reacting, icon versus icon, and this place was just coming unglued because, people in Toronto hadn't seen Hogan since WrestleMania 6, and
Yes,
that was
yeah.
another good guy versus good guy, champion
Yes.
versus champion. Who do we root
Ultimate
for?
Warrior. Yes,
And
exactly.
that was a split crowd of like, who do we root for? These are the two biggest names in the industry, and then here we are, all these years later. It's a repeat of that. Yeah, oh, man, that's a very memorable one.
Yeah, and that's it's hard not to go right back to that when I think of WrestleMania. And even at times when I wasn't into wrestling, the later 2000s, even into early last decade, there's a good chunk of years where I think me and a lot of people, a lot of other adult wrestling fans, or becoming adult wrestling fans, that
Mhm.
kind of tapped out a little bit on
Yep.
wrestling, and maybe until like the Daniel Bryan kind of 2013 2014 stuff. But even those times, like I would still get Royal Rumble and WrestleMania or watch them. Like I think there's still events that you're kind of tied to. Was that the case for you at times?
Yeah, so I kind of tapped out. I kind of came back around when you got into wrestling in about '02. But for a large chunk of the Attitude Era, I was kind of in and out, because I was that age, and it was actually when I moved overseas and we got wrestling on TV. We had very limited things to watch, and wrestling was on, and the Hardy Boys were becoming a thing, and my wife was obsessed with Jeff Hardy, and like we got back into it. And then when we started having boys, and this was right as the come up for John Cena and Edge and
Hmm.
Randy Orton, and so my boys were obsessed with Cena and Orton and all these guys, right? And so we were into it. But then when they started to lose interest, I started to lose interest. And so there was a large chunk over recent-ish years where it would be just kind of like once Royal Rumble came along, we're getting back into it. We got to watch that. And like through WrestleMania, and then it kind of stagnates. And also, the writing was pretty stagnant where you could stop tuning in at SummerSlam and come back at Rumble the next year. Nothing has changed.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, this is like my mom and her soap operas. Like I can turn on Days of Our Lives after not having seen it in 2 years and catch up by Wednesday of that week. I'm fully caught up because it
Yeah.
hasn't gone too far down the storyline, you know? And yeah, so it's unfortunately it kind of goes through phases, I feel like, with that.
Yeah. No, the athletic soap opera. I think that's always been such a great comparison.
Yeah.
In terms of where wrestling is at right now, and I've kind of had a lull, I guess, getting back into it
Mhm.
since the pandemic, since COVID was at its peak, and they didn't have wrestling in the fans in the stands. It was kind of done on location, and we saw kind of like the NBA playoffs in 2020, just like the monitors with people, and
The worst.
now fans are back. It's becoming a full events again. I went 5 years ago, and I just actually got the thing. It's funny. I know you and I had talking about WrestleMania today, and I got the Facebook notification like 5 years ago. You were in New Orleans watching
Oh yeah,
WrestleMania
yeah.
34, and I was like, oh, how about that? And that's one of those like fun events that when people ask me like, what's a big event you went to, like, the World Series, Super Bowl, whatever. Like, I went to the Super Bowl of wrestling, and it was
Yeah.
a great time. And I don't know, WrestleMania 40 is next year. You trying to go to Philly with me and Chandler?
You going to Philly?
Why
I'd go to
not?
Philly. Why not? That'd be a good
All right,
time.
all right. I think we
Good
start.
things are gonna happen.
Yeah, start planning now. I guess it's outdoors in Philly, which at first I was like, what is the weather like right now? But it's when I
Yeah.
looked at it this week, it wasn't that bad. So if it's
You're
the same
tempting
that it
fate though,
is,
because usually the outdoors ones are Orlando,
yes,
Vegas, things like that.
yes,
Philly, a little more temperamental.
yeah, that's a dangerous one, I think.
Yeah. Hmm.
So we'll have to see, but I think it'll be a good time no matter what.
Nice.
For last weekend and watching this year's WrestleMania, like where are you at with where the product is? And you mentioned the writing having not been so great at times, which is why we tend to
Yeah.
check out.
Yeah.
I think some of the storylines that we're seeing right now have been drawn out in a good way to the point where we are seeing some of the better stories we've ever seen, or on par with some of the best we've ever seen, especially in what's going on with the relatives of The Rock, who we talked about
Right.
earlier, and this thing called the Bloodline, where all the Samoan family, that's the Samoan dynasty that's been in wrestling now for 5 plus 6 decades.
Yeah.
We're on the third generation, working on our fourth generation. When Umaga's son, finally makes his debut too. Like, this is just something you don't really see in any sport. But with the current writing and things like that, like, what are your feelings on all that?
Yeah. I feel like for the first time in a while, the drawn out storylines have been productive as opposed to because they don't have anything else to do. So we'll just keep running back the same old matches in different forms. But they're actually building a
Mm-hmm.
story over years and years. And that's been really refreshing to watch. They've been building new stars. I've been enjoying a lot of the new stars, the Rhea Ripley's, bringing Cody back. There's been a lot of these guys. Um, and then there's been a whole ton of stuff in the last week about, the sale of WWE, who is in charge, because really for a lot of people, the flip in the quality of the writing and the character development and the just the if almost the care for the product seems to have coincided, or maybe not, for when Vince McMahon had to step down from the company over various allegations that were made. and he
Harvey
decided
Weinstein of wrestling, some might
really,
call him.
and that should not be a surprise,
Right? Nope.
right?
No, even
Uh,
wrestling fans, we know he's a
yeah,
turd.
that's
We know it.
not a surprise. So when he left the company and turned it over to, his daughter Stephanie, his son-in-law Triple H, Nick Khan, who's also been one of the leaders in creative. I think for most people, it's been, wow, this has been really interesting. Now suddenly there's fresh ideas. We're doing things, and I think that's been a nice 2-year run of really interesting things going on, and that may be coming to an end again now. So we're kind of at a crux right now
Yeah.
with where they're going to go.
After such a successful weekend and a fun time to be a wrestling fan, just right now, these last few months, what they've done with some of these top storylines, Cody Rhodes returning and his lineage, it seems almost like it was undone in
Yeah,
the snap of fingers and just overnight, that you go from having this great WrestleMania weekend and such a successful time in terms of the numbers and people's interest in the product, and now even with competition and somewhere else to a different wrestling product to put eyes on and buy tickets to, that WWE was putting itself back in a great position. And now with Vince McMahon trying to regain power or sell the company and not really knowing where that's going, or if the company that owns some MMA, like if they're going to get involved in what way and who's going to be in charge and what things were written for this guy that were changed, and it all seems to be a mess, and it's crazy how that happened. A week ago, we were enjoying ourselves with what a great WrestleMania weekend it was, even
yeah.
with the ups and downs. But now everything we're not really sure where things
Everything
are.
I've been doing a lot of reading since Mania, and
Wrestling fans can't read.
I know, uh, and that the big excitement for the Raw after Mania, which is always a thing, which is always huge thing, which is almost as good as Mania some years, is the Raw after, because you get a lot of debuts and surprises, and this year's was very lackluster. And then it comes out like, well, yeah, because there's this, the merger was announced Sunday that they're going to merge WWE and UFC are merging under this umbrella brand, and that Vince, as part of the deal, is kind of weasel his way back into being in charge of things. In fact, it seems to be under the power structure that I've been reading about. He's actually going to be Dana White's boss in UFC. That he's above him in the overall power structure of this merger,
Whoa.
and because he brings a larger stake to the table. I have a $9 billion company that I'm bringing to this merger,
Yeah.
and that he was backstage Monday night, and that he was rewriting things during the show. And so there's awkward moments where Seth Rollins is sent out and he's supposed to be taking on somebody making their debut. And as he's out there, they tell him, never mind, we scrapped the debut. Just get out. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, I'm leaving." That one of the wrestlers who's been a huge thing since Triple H took over, Bailey, who comes back, and she basically carried the women's division through the pandemic and the virtual era and blah blah blah, has had a great return to form lately, and was one of the like co-main events, like big matches of the weekend, is now out because of all of this, because she doesn't fall in the favor, and she's out. And there's questions about Cody Rhodes, who was the man who started a company that went against WWE, and there's all the back drama with him. And suddenly now, if Vince is in charge, does Cody lose his monstrous white hot push? And it's frustrating that one out of touch octogenarian, as Ronda Rousey referred to him as, can ruin things so quickly. It's
That's great.
frustrating.
Yeah, I saw that quote and it was just kind of like out of context at the time, but I love that that's what's going on
Yeah.
with that. Yeah, it's all unfortunate, I guess. We'll see how things end up, but if Paul Triple H Levesque stays in charge, then especially of the creative, then I think WWE will be in good hands and
Hopefully. Yeah.
has a good direction in how the company is being built. And but yeah, with Vince McMahon, we've as wrestling fans, we've known that he's just not a good dude, and that he even just kind of third grade sense of humor at
Yeah.
times can overtake what should be a good storyline, but can also go to just such weird places that you're like, this isn't even fun for third graders. Like,
I mean, okay, so I need your opinion on the fact that we have seen him fleetingly over recent years. He's come out, especially with the scandals of recent times. He's been out, on legitimate news programming talking about all of this. And as he's been trying to, there was a rumor a few months back that he had sold the company to a Saudi group, and that had people up in arms that the Saudi government basically was going to run this. And well, I
yeah,
guess women's wrestling is done here because they won't,
right.
they look down on that. But all that aside, we have seen him out there. He is an aging man. Vince McMahon is an older man. And then we see him reappear recently with, like, he put shoe polish in his hair. It's jet black hair with this Clark Gable, Walt Disney pencil, like straight out of a movie of what a villain should look like. I mean, to show up, the gall of to just show up like that's like no big deal is exceptional. It's amazing that he just shows up like that. I'm here. Well, this is what I've always looked like.
I saw a great meme this week of the Adams family.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
known as Adams, and just everyone
that's
else,
good.
Shane and Stephanie, all kind of brushed into it. Yeah, I don't know what he's doing, what he's thinking with that one. Somebody, like you said, the Walt Disney, I thought was just such a funny comparison. It does literally look like shoe polish. And I mean,
Yeah,
he's never had facial hair that we have ever seen
never.
in the 40
He's
plus
been on TV
years.
since the early '80s as a commentator.
Yes.
Never had facial hair.
Yeah.
And
And
then
now all of
goes,
a
I
sudden,
mean, he's one step away from just coming out with the Hitler mustache and being like, what's the big
he's
deal?
yeah, just keep it between the nostrils, brother. Yeah, wild stuff.
I
Ugh.
don't get it.
Well, I'm sure you and I will be talking about wrestling again in the future.
I
Um,
don't doubt it.
Before we get out of here, what have you been watching lately? What movies
Oh,
did you check out on Real Reviews? I know there's some Dungeons and
yeah.
Dragons stuff going on, or
Dude,
what?
I've been watching so many movies. I was down with COVID for about a week,
Mhm.
which meant me laying in the bedroom in quarantine and just all I can do is just watch things on TV to the point where I got tired of watching movies. And that's
Yeah,
saying a lot. Like, I didn't think I would ever reach that point, but it got to the point where like I'm just tired of watching stuff.
yeah,
But I watched so much. In theaters, I just went and saw the Air Jordan movie, Air, Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, about
nice.
the creation of Air Jordan. That was really good.
Yeah,
Really
is
enjoyed
that
that a lot.
so I'm basically live in the same town as Nike
Yeah.
headquarters, Beaverton, Hillsboro. Was
Yep.
there a presence, I guess,
Oh yeah.
of
It's all
like
takes place at Nike headquarters.
okay,
Ben
awesome.
Affleck plays Phil Knight, the
Yep.
CEO of Nike, and Matt Damon plays Sonny Vaccaro, who is the guy who discovered Jordan for Nike brand. Um, the big event, the big culminating event is the Jordans are coming to Beavertown. We
Okay.
have to get our presentation ready
Yeah.
because he's going to Adidas. We need to find a way. Nike was third string shoe company before
Yeah.
Jordan, just running shoes. Bruce Jenner, we got him. Um, yeah, it was great. It was a great movie. I saw Dungeons and Dragons. That was enjoyable. I'm not a big Dungeons and Dragons guy, so I felt like
Sure.
I probably missed 1,000 Easter eggs in that movie.
That's so funny. I'm
You
like
know,
loosely starting up I'm not into Dungeons and Dragons either, but coming in as the novice or the unknown at a
Mhm.
new podcast, which we'll get into in another time. But
Nice.
starting next week, I'm going to start recording with a couple of nerds, and
I love it.
about some Dungeons and Dragons. And then on the other hand of that, I will be teaching them about sports.
I
So
like this a lot.
it's yeah, there's some
Ooh,
fun. There's gonna be some fun back and forth there. But
I'm in.
so you said the Jordan movie was great. So
Yeah,
it's one of your highest so far. And Damon and Affleck, I have a great time with both those guys.
yeah,
Affleck, by the way, impeccable Spanish. If you ever get a chance
yeah,
to hear
yeah.
Ben Affleck speak Spanish, man,
Well, and
that
he
guy is
directed this. He's
legit.
a great director. I mean, he's a great director. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And this was one of the movies that was like at the beginning of the year was in my top 10 most anticipated. It
Yeah,
was nice that it lived up to that hype for me.
hell yeah,
So that was awesome. What else? Rewatched Ted Lasso from the beginning while I was out sick. Like that was a great. I'm feeling miserable. What can I watch? I'm gonna watch Ted Lasso. This will raise my spirits.
nothing does a better balance of comedy and serious issues of like laughing your ass off to tears and then
Yeah,
crying because of just I don't know the stuff that characters go through or memories that they're bringing up or whatever it is. Like
yeah,
I don't know if there's ever been a greater balance of a show as funny as Ted Lasso is that will also pull on your emotional heartstrings at the same
absolutely.
time or within one scene. It's really incredible, and I've yet to see this beginning of the third season. That's
Hmm.
they're in the process of right now, or
They're
it's
4 episodes in.
4 episodes in. Okay, so about close to a third or a half
Yeah,
way through this third season. I'm waiting till it's all out so I can binge it. It's not one that I'm too worried about spoilers
right.
because it's a comedy. So typically, I think that's one that I can hopefully hold off on and just kind of shotgun through on its way. But this was your first time watching Ted
No,
Lasso?
no, no. It was just
Okay.
because I only made it halfway through the second season, and
Yeah.
then we lost, Apple TV, blah blah. So I'm like, I'm just gonna start from the beginning, and
Yep.
just it's been so long since I watched the first episode. So
Sure.
yeah, there's that. And then I'll tell you about one last thing that I watched. I watched it last night actually, and it's one that I probably won't have on the show. I probably won't review on the show this week just because we don't have time. But um, it was a great movie. It was a film called "Smoking Causes Coughing," and I discovered it because one of my favorite movies of a couple years ago was this French film called Deerskin. That was about a guy who was a grifter, and he discovered this buckskin jacket, this fringe buckskin jacket that gave him a new personality. And this movie was insane. Deerskin was totally insane. I fell in love with it because it was like I don't know what's happening next in this movie. The jacket started to talk to him and control him. Wild. So here we are, 2023. This filmmaker, this French filmmaker, has another one, Smoking Causes Coughing. It's a French film about this team of like Mighty Morphin Power Ranger style superheroes. They're all in matching like rubber suits and they fight these rubber monsters. But when they kill them, they explode and there's blood and guts everywhere. And but they're having issues and they're run like Charlie's Angels style by a puppet rat, a rat puppet who calls them on this 19 they're like a 1970s conversion van, and he calls them on a little black and white TV and gives them their orders, blah blah blah. And the movie basically goes into like, you guys are starting to fall apart as a team. You're becoming too individualistic. I'm sending you guys on a retreat. You need to become a team again on this retreat. And the retreat is them telling ghost stories or scary stories to each other, but they're not scary. They're insane and they're replayed as memories. And each memory is more and more like an acid trip, to the point where they come back. The story just stops and they come back and everyone goes, well, that wasn't even scary. I don't even know what happened. What was that about? And like, oh yeah, I've got a story for you. And then a little girl wanders into their camp. She tells them this insane fever dream story. I think it's a movie that you either will love or absolutely hate. And I
Smoking causes
support,
coughing.
yeah, and I support both opinions because I can understand I can understand people that hate it, and it worked perfectly for me. I loved it. It was so good. It's in
Where
French.
did yeah, where did you find that one?
I rented it on YouTube last night
Okay.
for $6.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Wow. I feel like I gotta spend my $6 because
yeah.
whatever the hell you just said for the last 2 minutes, you took me on a bit of a journey.
Yeah, yeah. It's so impossible to even describe. It's just bonkers. So good
Okay.
time.
All right. Hell yeah. Well, I think that wraps up the show. Thanks for joining me on this wonderful Saturday morning.
It's always wonderful to join the esteemed at Anthony Deneau.
Well, when you got America's co-host as your co-host,
Right.
it's always magic ready to be made.
Oh boy.
All right, folks. Thanks so much for checking us out. He's Jameson. I am Anthony. This is Ant and Rabbit. Have a wonderful day.